About 24 hours ago, Cindy's physical body began a stunningly rapid decline. So quickly as her health deteriorated that her abused and frail body, apart from God's intervention, appears to have fought its closing battle. When the dear love of my life does release her body, that's when her healing will truly be complete and also miraculous. For as soon as she takes her last breath, in that very instant, she will be in the presence of her beloved Jesus, fully and forever alive, never to die again.
Steve and Cindy. Cindy and Steve. Kind of like peanut butter and jelly. One was seldom seen without the other. If Steve was busy preaching, Cindy was playing her keyboards. And if Cindy was leading worship, well then Steve would often be a vocalist on her team. Though each had that very rare combination of both leadership and charisma, it was the combination of the two doing life and ministry together that became a thing of captivating and magnetic beauty. Steve often said of Cindy when God drew up the blueprints on marriage that this was the bond he had in mind, and Cindy was the woman that he had envisioned. And as far as Cindy was concerned, well, she described how she felt about Steve in her journal. He was the love of my life, my earthly Jesus. He is my ever-faithful soulmate. Cindy had left her beloved teaching career when Steve felt called to start a church in a burgeoning new community called Anthem, and became more than his best friend and lover. She became his most valuable staff member. But even more when their church was quickly blessed beyond what anyone could have imagined or prepared for. Like the amazing trooper Cindy was, she released 6 rooms in her home to be used as a makeshift church office for more than 3 years. Whatever it took, she wanted her husband's ministry to make a kingdom impact. This multi-tiered partnership seemed almost idyllic, and happily ever after was the only proper way to end their story. Until December 2008, Cindy had been troubled by what they believed was an infection. After treating the infection without success, Cindy's doctors recommended surgery to remove the abscess. It was 3 days later that they received the call that no one wants to hear. And it was the night before Cindy, who was a mighty prayer warrior, wrote this prayer in her journal. God, I don't want cancer, I really don't. I pray for a miracle. I do desire spiritual growth. And if all of the above is no, will you spare my life, God? Will you keep me as a servant on earth just a little while longer, please, God? Hold me close, God. I need to sense your love all around me today. And 24 hours later, the next day, Cindy wrote, well, I have breast cancer. It was triple-negative breast cancer, a most vicious and aggressive monster that doesn't respond to typical therapies. Following a second surgery, they launched into radiation, genetic screening, and then dreaded chemo. And through it all, believing that God would provide the strength for their journey, as He always did. After their last bout of chemo, they threw a party, a Cindy's Cancer Journey is Over party. And now, thank God, we can put this thing behind us. This cancer thing is over. Except it wasn't. As Cindy and Steve were preparing for church the next morning, Cindy had a horrible seizure. A grand mal seizure that took her to the ground and once again thrust Steve and Cindy into yet another unwelcome reality. Her breast cancer had metastasized to her brain. The brain biopsy and MRI revealed 16 lesions. It was a diagnosis that resulted in another round of radiation and more chemo and countless scans and blood tests and vomiting and dizziness and tears and so much more. But again, it was Steve and Cindy who kept making this journey together, realizing how hard it had become to keep everyone who cared properly informed. It was then that Steve began a Caring Bridge site, a wonderful web tool for those going through life crisis. They wrote with such transparency that thousands of people would join Cindy in her struggle. When Cindy was about to lose her hair, Steve became her awkward beautician. Out to the patio together they went, and as he cut her beautiful locks of hair, they both cried. But moments later, Cindy said, "Take my picture." And when he did, Steve broke into that familiar smile that betrayed the wrenching drama that had so encompassed her life. You see, "Take my picture" became a common request. At most every chemo she'd ask it of him, as though she wanted to leave a legacy of joy despite her incredibly rugged journey. These pictures are the ones the entire family treasure to this very day. Steve sat with Cindy through all but 2 of her several dozen treatments, and when treatment began, he worked almost exclusively at home. Steve posted an entry during these days.
We walk, and then we wait. We wait, and then we walk. And yes, it is a painful process, but we are determined to suffer well. And we really do feel grateful that God has counted us worthy to endure this trial. Even more, we strongly believe that whatever happens is God's will, and He has His reasons. So, rooted in that truth, we fight. We fight for life.
Cindy's final post was on February 6, 2010, 1 year to the day after her initial diagnosis. Despite the assault that had been directed against her brain, she remembered well those early days. But even after a year of untold suffering, Cindy kept pointing those who had followed her journey to keep seeking their comfort in the Lord. The Lord hears us and listens to us, from Psalm 10. He who does these things will never be shaken, Psalm 15. But as for me, I will always have hope, Psalm 71:14. Cindy's final treatment ended on Good Friday, and on Easter Sunday, having celebrated nearly 30 Easters as ministry partner, Steve performed his duties alone. But he texted Cindy just as the service began. His final text to her read, "Missing you today. I love you more than ever." And 3 days after Easter, Cindy died. About 3 hours before she died, Steve wrote these words.
Please pray that the impact of my beloved hero's way too brief life will only be superseded by the impact of her breathtakingly courageous journey through the valley of the shadow of death. My Lord gave her to me, and now, apart from His miraculous intervention, He appears to be taking her away. May the name of the Lord be praised.
On April 7th, at about 9:45 p.m., Cindy dropped by heaven to see Jesus and decided to stay. From that day till this one, whenever Steve needs a Cindy fix, he has to set his sights on Jesus, because he knows that's where she'll be, close by her Savior, sitting in wonder at His foot, or tapping her foot with one hand raised and another on the keyboard as she loudly sings His praise. It's been nearly a year since Cindy stepped into Jesus' embrace, and exactly that same amount of time since Steve embraced her. And though the loss has been unspeakable, Steve knows what he must now do, perhaps with more vigor and passion than ever.
The only one who can write the next chapters of my life is me. However, the person most insistent that I write those chapters well, and the person most responsible for having infused my recent chapters with incredible love and joy and beauty, my beloved and inspiring Cindy. And so I will live the balance of my life well. How, you may ask? I'm not sure. At least not today, and maybe not day 18 or day 472 either. But I think I do know how for the next few moments. First, I'm going to keep reminding myself that God ordained the number of Cindy's days before one of them came to be. I'm also going to remind myself that He didn't take her until she had served His purpose in her generation. But there's one other how that will carry me for the next few ticks of the clock. See, I'm going to hit send on this post And then I'm going to remind myself that the true beauty of Cindy's story is now going to have to be written through me. And not just me, but through the lives of her children and grandchildren. Because Papa is never going to let them forget about their Grammy. Instead, I'll tell them that it now falls to them to carry out the balance of her story. The same goes for her friends and for every person, and they are legion, that Cindy reached out to and prayed for and hugged on and taught and served. And here's what I hope will happen as I make myself those 3 reminders. I hope that my way too quiet life won't feel so quiet after all. Who knows, though Cindy is no longer with us, but with him, maybe her final chapters will prove to be the most amazing of all, through which the incomparable and surpassing greatness of Christ can be clearly seen and loudly heard.